So this is a bit of a weird hand. It's a one lander. We would love this fortified village to just be a forest. Unfortunately, it's not. We're on the draw, so we could immediately draw another land, or we could traverse on turn 2. So I think we still want to keep this because the traverse can find us that second land, and the ruin in their wake can find us a third land. So even though it's technically a one lander, we've got some more play to it than that. And it looks like Hissing Quagmire, so definitely could be playing against Green-White Delirium here. But alright, so yep, here's a Grim Flyer, so it does look like that's the case. And there's a waste off the top, so that was a pretty good draw. So we can just go ahead and get rid of this Grim Flyer right now with our Spatial Contortion before taking a hit from it. And we'll just hold off on the Traverse and the Ruin in their wake. We could have cast Ruin in their wake to get a land, but would rather try to get this Grim Flyer off the table. Unfortunately, our opponent does have a second copy here. So we can start with the Traverse here to get ourselves a forest. So let's do that. And then continue on with Ruin in their wake. And now we can find a plane, so we have the double white for our quarantine field in hand. And next turn we'll have a bit of a decision to make. We are not delirious yet, so Ishkana would not come into play with the 3 spiders. And we're forced to kind of let our opponent do their thing a little bit with this Grim Flyer at this stage. We may want to use the Vessel of Nascency. We also, if we draw a land, there's definitely an argument to just playing the Tireless Tracker and getting a clue off of the tracker. And it looks like our opponent has beat us to the punch here with a Tireless Tracker of their own. That's pretty good. And I think there's a lot to be said for playing our own Tireless Tracker here. We can use it as a blocker, or our opponent may opt to use a removal spell on it. But let's go for it. If our opponent gets rid of it, it does add one more card type to the graveyard here for us. Right now we've only got 2 card types. And then the Vessel of Nascency will likely get us to Delirium. We just have to find the right time to deploy it. Now our opponent, interestingly, put a Grim Flyer and a Grasp of Darkness in their graveyard, so it may be that our opponent has another removal spell here, but it looks like some of these clues are going to get cracked. And our opponent's up more cards than us, but we do have some ways to get back in this game. Transgress the Mind. Okay, so that's gonna put a dent in our plans. It's gonna mean either the Worldbreaker or the Ishkana bite the dust. Our quarantine field is protected, and so is the Vessel, because they do not have converted mana costs of 3 or greater. And it looks like our opponent has gone ahead and taken our Worldbreaker away from us, which is pretty unfortunate. And we'll see if our opponent elects to attack in here or not. Not being delirious, our opponent basically should not attack with the Grim Flyer, although it's possible our opponent has a follow-up. Like something like a Deadweight, but I think this Grim Flyer attack was a bit aggressive, so we're just going to make this block here. And we are going to take 4, though, so that's going to bring us down to 14. And, okay, so we drew a Ruin in their Wake and a Vessel. Not the best draws that we could have hoped for. So we want to make some clues here with the tracker. So a couple of different ways we can do that. So we can crack the vessel and see what we find, which I kind of like doing. All right, let's go ahead and crack vessel to kick things off here. So we definitely got some options. Hedron, Archive, Evolving Wilds, Gideon, and then the Traverse we're not going to take. So it's close. I actually kind of like the Evolving Wilds because it gives us 2 clues from our tracker. And it gives us a land drop. So I'm going to take that. It also means that we're putting an artifact and a planeswalker in our graveyard. Plus this Evolving Wilds is going to our graveyard. So all of a sudden we have a bunch of card types in our graveyard, which is pretty nice. And now we can just search up. It doesn't matter too much what lands we get, as long as we're generating these clues, which we are. So now we're up to 3 clues here. And I think we actually want to attack here with the tracker. We're not really interested in trading it off because we actually like our opponents to put more permanents onto the battlefield to be able to quarantine field. So that may be one of the reasons that our opponent opted to attack there with the Grimflayer, is because we had an easy quarantine field of Grimflayer and tracker if our opponent did hit that additional land. But it looks like instead it's going to be a Grimflayer, and that's going to tick, or sorry, a Liliana. That's going to tick down and get back a Grimflayer. So we'll see if our opponent does elect to cast the Grimflayer here or not. Lily is down to 1 though. So our tracker can come in and attack that Liliana if we so choose to. But we have to be aware of our opponent getting a lot of card types in their graveyard. So it might be that our opponent actually wants that Liliana in their graveyard. And we can see just how much work these tireless trackers are doing for on both sides of the table. So here's a Traverse. And we'll see if that goes and gets... Yep, there it is. So the Traverse got Emrakul, and our opponent's got 5 card types now to work with. So there's a Canopy Vista off the top of our deck. That's pretty good. So I think we may actually want to just go ahead and quarantine field. Oh, we can get all of the permanents our opponent has in play. So the Clue Token, the Lily, and the Tracker. And by getting the Lily under the quarantine field, it then means that our opponent has 1 less card type in the graveyard. So I do kind of like this line. Let's go ahead and go for it. So yeah, we're going to go for Tracker, Lily, Clue Token. And then we also get in a hit here with our tracker. And we've got a bunch of clues now just waiting to be cracked. So if we draw a Traverse, we actually let's see. We could cast Emrakul right now. So we could go Traverse for Emrakul, or Traverse for World Breaker if we wanted to do it that way. So here's a Grim-Flayer. Opponents... Okay, so there's a Grasp. That's pretty annoying. And another Traverse. We'll see what our opponent wants to go get with this second Traverse. But I think we're favored in this spot, but it's still pretty close. Our opponent does only have 4 cards in their 4 card types in their graveyard still. So we have an option here. We could crack Vessel. But we also have all of these clues in play. We definitely want to have access to casting the Ishkana this turn if we want to. So we could go Vessel, crack Vessel, play Ishkana. That seems pretty reasonable. We could also just go crack a clue, see what we find, and then crack another clue. Pretty close, but I like cracking a clue here. And there's an Evolving Wild, so we're gonna end up playing this Forest here. So we can just crack another clue and then play Ishkana. And there's another Vessel. But we really want this Ishkana in play to prevent this Grim-Flayer from hitting us. And now we're wondering, wow, if we just had that World Breaker that our opponent exiled a while ago with that Transgress the Mind. But our best draws here, we've already got 2 Traverses gone, so we would like to draw one of those. Here's a Noxious Gearhulk. So that's pretty good. That is going to be able to take out our Ishkana, and now we're kind of forced into a bad spot, but I think we want to just go ahead and essentially double chump the Grim-Flayer, and we're definitely hoping to draw something here. We do need some more gas. And there's a World Breaker, so that's a pretty good draw. We can actually use the World Breaker to exile the Noxious Gearhulk if we want. So we've got enough mana to do that and crack a clue if we want to, because the Evolving Wilds does not come into play untapped. So sure, let's go ahead and start with cracking a clue. There's a Gideon. I don't think the Gideon changes our play here. So we're going to go for the World Breaker line and get this Noxious Gearhulk. Now, we would have liked to go after a land, but we really couldn't. The Gearhulk, we need to protect our life total here as much as we can. And just going to go ahead and send in the Spider token. I don't think we're going to block with it. So our opponent's got 3 cards in hand. We know about 2 of them. And now here's the 7th land. We're a little bit scared. There's one unknown card out there. And okay, so it looks like that one was a Liliana. So Liliana is going to mine us, but our opponent doesn't have anything great to get back right now with it. So it looks like just going to be a Grim-Flayer here. So, alright. I think we're okay with how that worked out. And we can go ahead and crack this Evolving Wilds here. And with all of this searching for lands we're doing, we're able to thin out a lot of the actual lands we have to make our draw steps better. As you can see, we've only got 6 basics left. And so the question is, how do we want to handle this Liliana Do we actually want it in our opponent's graveyard or not? Here's a Nissa Vital Force, so that is quite the draw step here. So we could actually tick it. We could tick it down. We could tick it up. A couple different ways we can play this here. So cards we could get back include Ishkana in our graveyard. So we could go down with the Nissa. We could also plus it. Now here's the issue though. If we get rid of the Nissa, that means, sorry, if we get rid of our opponent's Liliana, that means that with an untapped land, our opponent can Emrakul us, because the Liliana is going to add one more card type to our opponent's graveyard. So from that perspective, it may be that we want to just play this kind of a little bit slower. So we can still play the Nissa here if we want to. Sure, let's go ahead and put the Nissa into play. And we can untap a land, which I actually like that more than getting something back here. And so now we have this 5/5 waste back, which we can just use as a blocker, and then now we can also commit our Gideon to the board as well. So the other option is we could attack with World Breaker, but I think it's just not necessary here. So we have the option next turn to ultimate our Nissa if it's still in play with 6 counters. So I think we just want to pass the turn here and assume that our opponent can't Emrakul us. Alright, so the Lily's going to tick up, it looks like, on a Spider. And there's Ishkana. Okay, so it looks like we're kind of going into this back and forth board stall almost now. And another copy of Grimflayer. So our opponent's seen all 4 copies of Grimflayer this game. And now we can go ahead, crack the clue. And we've got some options here. Got a lot of options, actually. We can see what we can get off of a Vessel, which is pretty attractive option here. We can also look at going ultimate with Nissa, getting something back, but let's go ahead and crack a Vessel and hope to find Emrakul off of it. Alright, unfortunately we did not find the Emrakul, so we're just going to grab a Servant of the Conduit. And now we're definitely worried our opponent could potentially Emrakul us next turn, so we really have to be thinking about that. It's a pretty tough spot now that we're in. We could minus the Grimflayer, but it is only permanent, so we can't get back something like Traverse the Ulven Wall, which is what we really want. And our opponent could minus their Liliana on their turn, and then Emrakul us pretty much no matter what we do. Let's see, they've got 7 lands, so that would put 5 card types in the graveyard. Okay, so I guess they would still be They could still be one short. Alright, well, let's go ahead and go ultimate with Nissa and see how that works out for us. So we're going to get another draw step. There's a ruin in their wake, so we can actually use that now. We could also play the vessel, but I like just going ahead and using it. And we are able to trigger our Nissa. So we're going to draw a card off of that right now. And it looks like the pickup here is a Spatial Contortion. Okay, so we can go ahead and play the Servant of the Conduit out. And we could emblem our Gideon here, actually. I think I like ticking it up here and going after our opponent's Liliana. Now we also have to think about our opponent's spiders. We're at 9, so we could pretty easily just get drained out here by an Ishkana as well. So we kind of haven't had the best draw steps, and our opponents had pretty decent draws. And these 4/4 Grimflayers and the Ishkana can combine to... Our opponent's got some pretty good attacks here on their next turn. We do have a Spatial Contortion, which we can use. But I don't like our spot here. Alright, there goes the Liliana. So it looks like our opponent's still got 2 card types in their graveyard. Or 5 card types, sorry. That adds another card type. And there's a Mind Wreck Demon, okay. So our opponent didn't draw an untapped land, clearly. It was a Vessel of Nascency off the top for our opponent. So that Vessel is going to mean 6 card types. So now our opponent for sure is going to be able to Emrakul us next turn. And not too much we're going to be able to do about that. So we're really hoping to find our own Emrakul first. So we can go ahead, crack the Vessel, grab this Hedron Archive off of it. And there's another Vessel. So we're going to get to draw a card here off Nissa. See what we get. It's another Archive. Interesting. So I think I like going ahead and sacking the Vessel, still looking for our Emrakul. Instead we found a Quarantine Field, which we do want to take here. And that can potentially be pretty good. Let's see. So yeah, I definitely like casting the Quarantine Field here. And we can exile a lot of our opponent's stuff. So let's go ahead and do that. So we definitely want to get the Ishkana out of the way, and probably also the Mind Rack Demon, and then a couple of Grimflayers. Seems pretty good for 1 card. And we have our Gideon still here, so we can actually make an emblem with it if we want to. I don't mind that play. We could also tick it up. I like both options. Let's go ahead and tick it up, though. And I kind of like actually attacking with the World Breaker as well. It's a little bit greedy, but we know that our opponent just has that Emrakul in hand. The unfortunate part about this line is that our opponent can use the Spatial Contortion we have to kill one of our own creatures, which is a little bit annoying. Our opponent also has a better play. So what our opponent can do if they see this line is going to be attack with our World Breaker, and then into the Emrakul, block the Emrakul, or block the World Breaker with Emrakul, then get our own World Breaker back and use it to exile one of our quarantine fields. But that's a pretty complicated play, so we'll see if our opponent actually does see that or not. And it looks like our opponent probably sees it because of looking at this attack. It looks like our opponent does see the line that is best here. So yeah, these games against the Black-Green Delirium deck can be extremely grindy, and we're really seeing an example of that here. So it looks like our opponent is going to get back our World Breaker, and then World Breaker away one of the quarantine fields, presumably the one with more cards under that. And that's going to leave us in a spot where we're going to really want to draw Descend Upon the Sinful. That's going to be by far our best draw at this point. Now, if we do draw Descend, we're really liking our spot, but I believe there's one copy left in our deck. But we don't have that many cards left in our deck, though. We've only got 11 cards left in our deck. So this is pretty crazy. So yeah, there's the Spatial Contortion. That's going to get rid of a Night Ally. Makes sense. And so we're going to be able to draw some cards. We haven't hit some of our big whammies that we would have liked to. So here's a Hedron Archive, which I kind of like cashing it in just immediately here. So yeah, we can afford to do this. So let's go ahead and draw 2 cards off an archive. And there's the Descend that we were looking for. Exactly what we wanted. So we're going to get the card draw here off the Nissa. And it's actually getting to the point where we might actually want to stop drawing cards. Alright, so now we can go ahead and use our Descend Upon the Sinful. And this is pretty insane, this game. And I like actually just making an ally as well. So that's going to protect us against our opponent's Hiss and Quagmires. So now our opponent has gotten a lot of their primary threats exiled. Although here's a Mindwrack Demon, okay. But the fact is that we still have this Emrakul left in our hand, which could pretty easily end up being the nail in the coffin. So I like making an emblem with Gideon. And we can still go ahead and draw a card off our Nissa emblem. So now we can attack with our 5/5 Angel. And this Emrakul hopefully is going to be able to close the game out for us. So we can attack our opponent's Mind Rack Demon into our Emrakul. There's a Hissing Quagmire. So yeah, we're just gonna go ahead and attack with the Mind Rack Demon, block, and that's gonna be it. Our opponent needs to peel something immediately here. So just passing the turn, so I think we're gonna be able to take this game here actually. Alright, so now we're going on to game 2. That was a doozy of a game, for sure. So taking a deep breath after that one, for sure. So after sideboard, we do want to board in a Tireless Tracker, an additional Tireless Tracker. The Stasis Snares are reasonable here as well. Thought Knot is pretty good, but it's competing with our other 4-drops. So we definitely want to cut our Spatial Contortions. Even though they get rid of Grimflayer, in general, they're not that amazing. And then we can board in Nissa. I think that Ishkanah is another card we can consider cutting, or at least shaving on. So I like going down to 1 Ishkanah. And then as far as Thought Knots, I like having 2. And then that means we kind of have to board out one of our 4-drops. And so I'm fine with shaving one of our Hedron Archives in this matchup and keeping in all of our ramp, our Planeswalkers, and the big stuff as well. So yeah, gonna try this configuration for game 2. And we have to think about, though, our opponent could be boarding in cards like Natural State, just because they saw Quarantine Field be so effective for us, that it's possible we see a card like that just to get rid of the Quarantine Fields. But we'll see if our opponent wants to go in that direction or not. And the Servants, they're not as good on the draw, so sometimes I will board them out. We do have an additional one sitting in the board, but on the play, I would definitely want that 3rd Servant in our deck. Because we're taking out our Spatial Contortions, though, we do really want something to do on turn 2. So one of the advantages and one of the reasons why we saw our opponent take so long sideboarding there is they have no... I mean, they saw our deck, but we went through almost all of our deck in that game. But it's hard for them to know still like what we're doing after board, how should they sideboard against us. And so that's a bit of an advantage that we have. And we have an option between Traverse and Vessel here. I think I want to go with the Vessel here. I could see a version of an argument to play the Traverse. If we had Ruin in their wake in our hand, we definitely would Traverse for a waste here. But we may want to keep the Traverse in order to get a creature. It's unclear at this point. And okay, there's an Evolving Wilds. I think we just play a land and pass here, with the intention of cracking the Vessel. And here's a Grimflayer. So that's pretty good. We don't have the white source immediately to be able to get rid of it. But we may... Okay, so we're just going to grab that plains off of the vessel. And that way we can just go ahead and stasis snare this Grim-Flayer right now. And still only two card types in our graveyard, but we do have Evolving Wilds, and there's another vessel, so we should be able to get up to Delirium. And here's a Verdurous Gearhulk. Was not expecting that. So that's a big creature. Not gonna be that easy to deal with, actually. So we have to think about how we want to manage this situation. And I think we may, as weird as it is, we may just want to play out our Gideon here and just know that our opponent may kill it with the Gearhulk, but we're fine with that exchange. Because we're really just trying to get Delirium, and so now if our opponent does kill the Gideon, which it looks like they are, that's going to be that fourth card type in our graveyard. And we really want to find Emrakul here. So there's the follow-up Grim-Flayer, but our opponent does not have Delirium at this point in time. Alright, so here I like just going ahead and play Hedron Archive, and then we can traverse for Emrakul. We could also get Worldbreaker as well, but Emrakul is definitely the more powerful option. Yeah, I think we go for Emrakul. But there is definitely an argument for getting Worldbreaker in the spot, because it does exile the Verdurous Gearhulk. Alright, it looks like our opponent's going to be getting aggressive here, so there's a Grasp of Darkness. That's going to take care of the token that we had in play, and our opponent's going to be able to hit us here for at least 10 damage, which is a lot, but that's part of the reason why we ran out that Gideon earlier, was to be able to buffer our life total. So we're just going to take 10 to the face, and that's going to bring us down to 10, but our opponent now is going to get in this hit with the Grim-Flayer, so we'll see if there is something to be found here to enable Delirium, or how our opponent wants to stack their deck. And the unfortunate part of this is that our opponent's going to know we're going to be playing Emrakul, presumably, on our next turn, so they're going to be able to set the top of their deck in a way that's going to be good against our line here. But either way, we just want to crack our vessel and see what we can find here. And okay, there's a Worldbreaker, so now we have more or less the best of both worlds. We have both Emrakul and Worldbreaker at our disposal. And so the question is now which one we want to play first. And I actually like playing the Worldbreaker here first, weirdly enough. So sometimes you just got to go with your gut. And we are going to save the Emrakul for next turn. And part of the reason why I like this line is because we're able to exile the Gearhulk, and then we know that our opponent stacked their deck in a way to try to get around Emrakul, and now we're going to be taking the turn that our opponent didn't expect we were going to be taking. So it's kind of that mind game that's going on right now. So we're probably going to be drawing a card that our opponent didn't might not have wanted us to draw during the turn that we're taking of theirs. And so that's basically the reasoning behind it. Alright, but now we definitely want to go ahead and play our Emrakul. And so we'll see exactly what our opponent is up to at this point. And it looks like this is just going to be a forced Grasp of Darkness and a To the Slaughter. So we're just going to clearly sacrifice the World Breaker here. And there is a copy of Pick the Brain. So we can go ahead and cast that. And we don't really care about the Hedron Archive that much, so we can go ahead and exile that and then just run the Grim Flare into the Emrakul. So our opponent looks like is just going to go for the hit us with Hissing Quagmire play, which is not very scary. And there's a Transgress. So the Transgress is going to be pretty good. It's able to take care of one of our threats, but it's not too big of a deal. We just can play Land Pass, and our opponent just has to draw an answer to Emrakul, or else we're going to take the match. It's just that simple now. We could have sacrificed the Hedron Archive, but what we can do is we can actually get back our World Breaker here. So, okay, there's an Appetite the Unnatural, but that doesn't do anything. It's not good enough. So our opponent did board in an answer to the Stasis Snare, but we're just going to come across in the air, and that's going to do it here. So you can see just how back and forth these games can get. And that's the match.